while I'm not there, I do hope to hear. Because I know I will hear, I know I will get news, and I hope it is good news. He says that I will hear of you that you are standing in one spirit. Our Christian obligation does not end when nobody's around. And Paul is saying, when I'm not around, I desire to hear the news that what? You are standing firm in one spirit. I don't expect to hear the news, man, nag-aaway sa church. Nagdidimandahan, nagpapatayan. And that is really the news that Paul hears. That's why there's a lot of epistles. Because there was a lot of fighting in the church. And he's saying to the church in Philippi, I hope I don't hear that. I hope what I hear is that you guys are standing firm in one spirit. And that is the message also of God today to us. That all of us are standing firm. Remember, I told you that the primary recipient or benefactors of the land in Philippi is the ex-military people. And the word standing firm is a military term. It is a military position. It's a phalanx position. When the Roman would go to war, they would have to what? Stand their ground. Shield, they have to form a box. Where all the front are the shields. In fact, all the top also sometimes are shields also. Para if there's an arrow that has flames, it lands, they're shielded. And what's important there is that what Paul is saying first is that they are to stand firm, they are to hold ground, and the idea here is a military holding firm, not budging in, not giving away a single inch to the enemy, and they're locked in arms, shield side by side, watching each other. And it's not about when you stand firm in a Roman position for war, individual acts is irrelevant. What matters is everybody is working as one unit. Hindi ka pwede maging bayani dyan. Yung ibang tao may messianic thought eh. Here, Christ is telling us, God and Paul is telling them and us to stand firm, to be united with one spirit. Because what's happening in the church is there were several spirits fighting. And the concept here, there is an external opposition attacking the church. And yet, the church is divided. They're not standing firm in one spirit. They're standing one by one. And if that happens in a Roman formation, guess what? They will be annihilated. Magkanya-kanya sila. Try to imagine an army that's well-trained, good formation against an equal number of soldiers scattered. Patay yung hindi coordinated. Right? And in modern warfare, it's holding ground, not giving an inch. Individual skills are secondary to the mass unit. But sabi ko nga, instead of helping one another, standing firm, Christians are fighting. And they forget. They choose not to forget. They choose to keep grudges. They choose to gossip. They choose to divide. And Paul is saying, guys, the gospel will not progress. Because of that, the enemies will succeed. Because we're divided. United we stand, divided we fall. And Paul wants us to unite and not divide. Heroism has no place in this arena. Complete harmony of purpose and the coordination of the various parts and elements is necessary to achieve God's purpose. Hindi pwedeng kanya-kanya. We are not called to live our Christian lives alone. And we are not called to fight our enemies alone. We are called to stand together in one spirit in repelling the enemy. Right? There is an enemy. And I tell you, it's not your brothers in the church. So that's a problem. Right? The brothers in the church is your enemy. No, that's not the enemy. I remember a good thing I heard in one of the CCF marriage retreat. Guys, your wife is not your enemy. Tama naman. It's the devil. Or wives, your husband is not the enemy. It's the devil. So similarly, Christians, the other believers, other Christians is not your real enemy. It's the devil. We're here to promote and push the gospel, and that is being hindered, and that will be hindered if we are divided, if we are not standing firm in one spirit, with one mind, striving together for the faith of this gospel. And the Bible tells us here that it is a struggle, it is striving, it is not easy. That's why what is important, as I keep on telling myself and my sister lately, focus. Have one objective and be focused. One mind, one spirit, one heart, one conscience for the furtherance of the gospel. And it will be a struggle. Why? Because we are moving against the flow. There will be challenges because we are up against a society that's against Christ, that's against the gospel. That's why we have to be united, helping one another to push further the gospel, the plans of God. Having the same Christian team spirit and helping each other, struggling together as our faith is being tested in order to promote the gospel of Christ. Verse 28. In no way alarmed by your opponents. Paul is telling them, as you struggle, huwag kayong magpasindak. Don't be coyed by the enemy. The word there, alarmed, suggests a reflex reaction, being startled. It gives that idea of panicking. Don't panic. Don't be intimidated when adversaries comes to you, and the idea here is starting a horse to charge into battle. And Paul says, don't be intimidated by whatever thing that the enemy will throw at you. I remember talking to a friend about Manny Pacquiao, right? Manny Pacquiao made a strong statement against the LGBT, whatever they call that letter. LGBT, TB, or whatever. And what happened? All these LGBT people was up in arms. They're so loud. They're so noisy. They're the loudest. They bark the loudest. And guess what? Manny Pacquiao is number 3 or 4. Mas taas pa. Don't be startled. Yes, there will be enemies. Yes, there will be opposition because we're swimming against the flow. And yes, they will threaten you. And threaten you with your very life. Don't be intimidated. Why? Because I am with you. We are to be unflinchable. We are to be steadfast in the midst of persecution. We are not to be intimidated. I mean, that is the enemy. We are to stand together in one spirit, in one mind, and as we stand together, we are not to be intimidated by our enemies. And he gives a word of encouragement. He says, which is a sign of destruction for them, but of salvation for you, and that too from God. Was a sign of destruction for them, but of salvation for you, and that too from God. You know, I realized something, that any false follower of Christ will be found out in times of persecution. Because false followers of Christ will not be willing to lay their life or suffer persecution. That's why it says there, it will be a sign for you of your salvation. But for them, it will be a sign of their destruction. Please go to 2 Thessalonians, please. While going there, as the Philippians stands firm in the face of adversaries, proves the relationship with their God, prove their conviction to their God. 2 Thessalonians 1, verse 4 to 8. We proudly tell God's other churches about your endurance and faithfulness in all the persecution and hardships you are suffering. And God will use this persecution to show His justice and to make you worthy of the kingdom for which you are suffering. In His justice, He will pay back those who persecute you. We have a just God. Verse 7, God will provide rest for you who are being persecuted, and also for us when the Lord Jesus appears from heaven. He will come with His mighty angels in flaming fire, bringing judgment on those who don't know God and those who refuse to obey the good news of the Lord Jesus. The book of Philippians was written for the believers. Paul wants them to realize that their enemies is the enemies of God. That's a frightful thought. Their enemies is the enemies of God. And their persecution is a sign that they who persecute you will be destructed. Because as they are your enemies and you represent God, they are the enemies of God. Please go to Romans chapter 12. Please.